You are listening to PR Radio Station of America.
It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon in Leominster, Massachusetts, when Edward Hip drove into the parking lot of his apartment building. He had just picked up his 5-year-old daughter from school. She has autism and relies heavily on routine. Edward noticed something strange on the way back. Unmarked vehicles seemed to be following him. He called his wife, telling her in a nervous voice that something didn't feel right. He thought it was safer to head directly home. As Edward pulled in and quickly walked toward his front door, immigration officers in plain clothes and tactical gear surrounded the area. In the rush, the little girl became separated from her father. Within moments, she was sitting on the pavement near a dark SUV, clutching her bottle. Several male agents stood around her, forming a circle. Her mother, who had just come outside, was stunned by what she saw. The mother began recording on her phone, her voice trembling as she shouted, "They took my daughter. She's 5 years old. She has autism spectrum. Give me my daughter back." Her words cut through the scene with raw emotion. Neighbors peeked from windows and doors, alarmed by the sight of a small child encircled by armed men. To the mother, this was not law enforcement. It was a nightmare unfolding in broad daylight. Video evidence later showed agents calling out to Edward from outside the building. One officer asked, "Is that your daughter? Come here so I can see those IDs." From behind the locked door, Edward tried to negotiate, saying, "I can give it through the door." The agent refused, pointing to the ground in front of him and insisting that Edward step out. The daughter remained nearby, a silent witness to the tense standoff, her small body rocking slightly in distress. Every passing second deepened the fear in the family. The mother feared not only for her husband's arrest, but also for the emotional well-being of her child. The girl's condition meant loud voices and sudden changes triggered anxiety. Witnesses later described her as confused and frightened. For the family, the moment symbolized how far immigration enforcement was willing to go, crossing a boundary by pulling a child into the middle of an operation. From behind the locked door of his Leominster home, Edward Hip could hear the voices of immigration agents outside. His heart pounded as he saw them standing near his young daughter. He had lived in Massachusetts for 22 years, building a quiet life, working steady jobs, and raising 2 children who were both born in America. Now, he feared that stepping outside might mean permanent separation from his family. The agents continued pressing him. "Bring your ID out here," one of them said firmly. Edward replied cautiously, "I can give it through the door." His voice revealed both defiance and desperation. He wanted to comply but could not bear the thought of being taken away in front of his daughter. The officers ignored his request, insisting he come outside in person, their tone leaving little room for compromise. Inside, his wife tried to calm their daughter, who was now back in her arms after neighbors and local police arrived. The child clung to her mother's shoulder, confused by the flashing lights and the raised voices. The mother whispered softly to her, promising everything would be all right, though she herself was not sure what the next minutes would bring. She continued filming, knowing video evidence might be the only way to protect her family's side of the story. By now, word of the confrontation had spread. Neighbors stepped outside, phones in hand, capturing snippets of the tense exchange. Some were outraged that a small child was caught up in what looked like a trap to pressure her father. Others stood silently, uneasy but uncertain how to intervene. For many, this was their first direct glimpse of an immigration raid in their own neighborhood, and it left them shaken. Edward remained inside, refusing to surrender on the agent's terms. Each demand from outside was met with silence or short replies through the door. He hoped the presence of neighbors, local police, and cameras would discourage the agents from escalating further. But the pressure was undeniable. For Edward, every passing minute felt like a gamble. Protect his family's dignity or risk being taken away under forceful circumstances. The standoff reached a breaking point when Leominster police cars pulled into the parking lot. Their arrival created a clear divide between federal immigration agents and local officers. Residents hoped the police would prioritize the safety of the child. Tension filled the air as the two groups exchanged quick words about jurisdiction and responsibilities. One officer stepped forward and insisted the child be returned immediately to her mother. Witnesses later said it was a moment of relief as the little girl was guided back into her mother's arms. The crowd, watching closely, murmured in approval. Her mother held her tightly, whispering that she was safe. For a brief moment, the chaos paused, replaced by a fragile sense of relief. With phones recording, neighbors began speaking to reporters who had arrived. They described what they saw as intimidation tactics. Some criticized the agents for targeting a child to pressure her father. Others expressed fear that such tactics could be used on their own families. The growing collection of videos and testimonies began shaping the public's understanding of what had unfolded. The local police presence created friction with the federal agents. While the agents pressed for cooperation in detaining Edward Hipp, local officers made it clear their priority was protecting the immediate well-being of the family. The mother later told Telemundo that without the intervention of local police, she feared her daughter might have been held longer. Although the girl was safe at home that night, the family remained on edge. The neighbors lingered outside, offering words of support, but also worrying about what might happen next. For Edward, the message was clear. The federal authorities were determined, and this confrontation was only the beginning. The community sensed the incident was far from over. 2 days after the confrontation, just as the family was trying to settle back into a fragile routine, federal agents returned. This time they came quietly, approaching the building from the back alley. Neighbors noticed the unmarked vehicles and whispered to each other that the officers were back. The mother later said she felt a knot in her stomach the moment she saw them step onto the property. Edward Hipp was at home, unaware of how close the agents already were. The officers positioned themselves near the back door, avoiding the front where cameras and community members might notice. According to his wife, it all happened quickly: footsteps, shouts, and the sound of officers demanding that he open the door. The family's sense of safety, so recently restored, collapsed in an instant. When Hipp stepped outside, officers immediately surrounded him. Witnesses said he raised his hands, repeating that he was not resisting. Still, the officers restrained him, placed him in handcuffs, and moved him swiftly into a waiting vehicle. His children, watching from a window, cried as their father was driven away. His wife described the moment as heartbreaking and powerless. News of the arrest spread rapidly through the neighborhood. Friends and neighbors who had rallied around the family only days earlier now felt stunned. Some expressed anger that the agents had come back so soon after the dramatic confrontation with the young girl. Others voiced frustration that the community's outcry had not stopped federal authorities from pursuing Edward with such determination. By nightfall, Edward Hipp was transferred to an immigration detention center in Plymouth. His wife confirmed to Telemundo that he was being held there, awaiting the next steps in his case. She emphasized that her husband had lived in the country for more than 2 decades, raised 2 children who were citizens, and had no record of serious crime. For the family, the fear of separation had now become a harsh reality. With Edward now in detention, his wife was left to comfort their children and handle daily life on her own. The 5-year-old, still shaken from being surrounded by officers earlier in the week, clung to her mother constantly. At night, she would wake up crying, asking where her father had gone. The mother told reporters that keeping the children calm was her greatest challenge, but she tried to reassure them that their father loved them and was safe. Community leaders, immigrant rights groups, and neighbors began organizing vigils and small protests outside of the family's home. Signs reading "Families belong together" and "Children are not tools" appeared across Leominster. Local officials criticized the use of a child as leverage, calling the tactic inhumane. Several faith leaders issued joint statements urging compassion and demanding accountability from federal agencies. The story quickly spread beyond Massachusetts. National outlets replayed the Telemundo video showing the little girl encircled by officers. Editorials described the image as symbolic of deeper problems with immigration enforcement. Members of Congress requested briefings on the incident, with some calling it a violation of human rights. Advocates argued that if such actions could happen in a quiet Massachusetts town, they could happen anywhere. The Department of Homeland Security eventually responded, saying the agency's goal was to bring Edward Hipp into custody and that all procedures were followed. Officials did not confirm or deny details of how the child was involved. Spokespeople emphasized that Hipp had been under an order of removal and that enforcement actions are part of their duty. Critics countered that following the letter of the law should not justify traumatizing children. As Edward remained in detention, his family faced an uncertain road ahead. His wife said she feared deportation would permanently separate him from their children, who were citizens. Lawyers representing the family vowed to fight for his release, arguing that decades of residence and deep community ties should matter. For now, the story of one small girl and her father captured national attention, raising urgent questions about how far immigration enforcement should go. This is the end of that story. Now tell me in the comments, what's your story? I'll read out the most interesting ones in the next video. Do not forget to hit a like button and subscribe. See you.